So we're going to keep things moving along here and trying to stay on time as much as possible. So we have our next keynote is going to be from Barry McCarthy, and he is the president and CEO of Deluxe, and he's going to be here to talk about the next revolution in fintech. So Barry, please come up. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I have a handful of slides to tell you a little bit about Deluxe, a company you think you know, but you probably don't. And then talk a little bit about what I would consider a handful of principles that are really going to drive what is next in fintech. And then I'll give you a couple of examples of how we're trying to use those principles at Deluxe, and then we should have plenty of time at the end for questions. So let me tell you a little bit about Deluxe. So everybody probably knows Deluxe historically as a check printer, and we're still good at check printing. The company's been in business 107 years, and we really kind of think of the company as the original payments company. The guy that started our company, a guy named W.R. Hotchkiss, invented the checkbook and is still the payment instrument all of us are trying to disintermediate. We've been working on it for a long time now, and pieces of the market have completely been disintermediated, but there's still quite literally billions of checks being written every year. So I know this is not a conference about checks, but it does give you some perspective about how big the opportunity is for us collectively as fintechs. So our company every day, 363 days a year, ships 150,000 packages of checks to businesses and consumers every day. So that is billions upon billions of checks every year that we are still printing. It's because fintechs have yet to solve for some of the most intractable problems in payments, which is really what the opportunity is for all of us that are trying to disrupt the status quo. The company really started a transformation about 3.5 years ago from being just a printing company that did a great job at checks to reposition the company as a payments and data company. And our tagline is payments, trusted payments and business technology. And we've really accomplished that. Going into 2023, the company's largest business will be our payments business, electronic payments. And so it will be the largest business in the company. The first time in the company's history, there's a business larger than checks. And just for scale, you can see there the sort of the GWOW number is the sleepy company that you all think of Deluxe being is actually already processing about 2.8 trillion, almost $3 trillion a year of electronic payments from all sorts of sources: credit cards, debit cards, inbound checks, lockbox operation, remote deposit capture, ACH origination. So the fact that you only think of Deluxe as a check printer, it means you're a couple generations behind, at least several years behind on what the new Deluxe is about. And the company is really focused on trying to live its values. Now, I won't go long on this, but to tell you that we really have a handful of values that we try to run the company on. The first one being customer first. The second one is around earning trust. Grit and perseverance, super important as we go through the transformation. Innovation and the power of one, which is where we'll really talk about bringing the best of each other to work every day and trying to solve really difficult and tractable problems for customers. Here's just a little visual on the transformation. You may have seen that once or twice in your time in life. And here is our logo today. So the logo itself is really not very important, except that it really symbolizes, I think, the change of the company from an old school, non-digital, non-fintech company to the company it is today, which is a forward company really working in digital payments, digital commerce, with a pretty significant footprint. So I gave you a little bit about this. Fintech obviously is a huge category, and it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. My personal definition, what fintech is about and what it means, is the ability to conduct commerce anywhere, anytime, any platform, anyhow, with as limited friction and with as much ease as possible. And so that means it extends to what's happening in insurance. It extends to what's happening in core payments, whether that's credit card payments, whether that is lockbox operations. It's really about the next generation and in how we serve customers in a way that is most effective and most efficient. I think the biggest, if I were going to criticize us collectively, all of us, in the fintech arena or aspiring to be in the fintech arena, we all fall in love with our solution. And we find a way to solve a problem, and we consider that the finish line. But the bottom line is, there is rarely, maybe never, where there is one fix and it solves all of the problems. So for example, Zelle is a fantastic success. Venmo is a fantastic success. RTP is on its way. There are all sorts of examples where there have been innovations that have come along and solved one part of a problem. But there aren't very many today that are solving an ecosystem-wide problem. So if you think about B2B payments, where a company still makes a whole ton of money by printing checks, why are there still so many paper checks? It's because no one has really solved for the entire ecosystem problem. If you are a healthcare company and you have to settle a claim, someone goes, you go and break your leg, you go to the hospital. The hospital sends a notice to your insurer that says, I want $10,000 for the broken leg. The hospital, I'm sorry, I did that backwards. The hospital sends the note to the insurance company, and the insurance company says, wait a second, the policy limit is $8,000, so I'm only going to pay $8,000. The way it works today is almost all of that is done via paper today. And what travels from the insurer to the provider, no joke, on paper. An explanation of benefits gets printed, a paper check gets printed, it goes into a paper envelope with a paper stamp often that goes into the mail for a receiving clerk to open and then try to reconcile. So a lot of people have done some really cool stuff. RTP, Zelle are great examples where they've made it easier to move the money and have done a pretty brilliant job at that. But that's only part of the problem. Because how on earth is the healthcare provider, in this case the hospital, going to be able to reconcile why they only got $8,000 versus a $10,000 charge? So if they only get a credit into their account that says it's got $8,000 associated with it, they don't know how to reconcile. And you've created a mess inside the receivables department of the healthcare provider. Obviously, the more sophisticated the provider, the easier it is for them to reconcile. But in healthcare, there's still thousands, tens of thousands of individual healthcare practices, small surgical centers that are still doing this, and they've got to have now a clerk that's able to reconcile all that. That's why there's still so much paper, because we haven't solved the whole problem. We've solved a part of the problem, which is the payment part, or moving the actual money or moving the money fastest. And I personally have a theory about why that's true. And it's because most of us in the industry probably grew up somewhere around banking. And we learned how it was to manage money between accounts, how to do debits and credits, how to manage fraud. And so that's the natural problem that we want to go solve. But that's only a small, small, small part, and honestly maybe the easiest part of the problem to solve. So fintechs are out coming after all of us, because they want to solve that problem in a way that they not only solve the problem, in this case sending an explanation of benefits from the insurer to the hospital, but they also want to take the payment transaction, because that's where they're going to make some money. And so that is how fintechs have a great opportunity, honestly, to disintermediate banks, other companies even like our own, by solving the intractable problem, that last mile, or the most difficult stuff that there is to solve. So there's lots more cases to discuss about that, but I want to give you sort of the underlying most root principle that, at least as a company, our company tries to solve, which is, what is it that the customer needs and the problem to solve? And we put that all in a category of customer first. It's putting the customer's needs first, solving their problem first. Not just trying to get them to buy one product or one service, but what is the problem we're trying to solve, and how do you get the customer at the beginning of the conversation, not just giving them what you want to give them, but helping them actually solve a problem. So as I think forward, we have a little catchphrase inside our shop that I think maybe is helpful here as we think about disrupting payments and where does fintech go next. We just put it into this broad bucket of payments with a purpose. And I think there's 5. I think of them as principles that really guide and should be guiding to us as we think about, I think, fintech and the future here. The first is anything that reduces friction and ultimately gets it down to be frictionless is a winner. If we just talked about the healthcare payments that I outlined, we haven't really solved for friction. All we really solved on some of these payment mechanisms that we're doing today, and yeah, there's more coming, but the use case that was initially solved was for speed. That's an important problem. But it's not the only problem, and it's not the highest point of friction. The highest point of friction in that healthcare payment is how do you get the information from the insurer, from the provider to the insurer and back to the provider in a way that they can manage their systems entirely. So frictionlessness is important. But frictionlessness by itself, even though I know that's not a word, even by itself, frictionlessness is not sufficient. If you think about other use cases where people have brought changing technologies to the market, it's not sufficient. Think about Apple Pay. And I use Apple Pay all the time. I bet everybody here uses Apple Pay a lot. But we're like many, many, many years into it. And it solves a big part of the problem. It's especially useful for remote payments or e-commerce or mobile commerce-based payments because you really can buy now. The Buy Now button with Apple is a great thing. But you're still, if you're going to use Apple Pay at the point of sale, are you going to pull out your phone? Or are you going to pull out your wallet? Haven't solved for that friction. You made it somewhat less friction-filled, but you really haven't solved it. You've improved it. And so I think a lot of times it goes back to the same point I made earlier, where a lot of us in the space are solving one problem but not solving the whole thing. We're reducing friction, we're not making it frictionless. Second thing, it's got to be smart. So if you think about that healthcare example that I just gave, or you just think about any large-scale B2B payment, how is it actually going to work to make sure that it fully reconciles and that the general ledger will foot? How is that possible? And at scale, it means that systems have to be really, really smart. Now, I don't mean like smart as in a smartphone. I mean as in smart like AI, that it actually can look at inbound payments, match them remotely or using AI to inbound payments so that you can start reconciling on a more automated way, just as an example. Third thing I would put out there is flexible. What our definition of flexible is as providers of services is probably a whole lot different than what customers think. And so, I think if you went and you talked to customers about what's happening in some of the new payment types, a Venmo, PayPal, they solve some of the flexibility, but not fully flexible, meaning that it doesn't provide all the capability and functionality that the customer is looking for. I think number 4, I don't really need to comment on. I think everybody gets that point about the notion and the importance of security, but I do want to pause on it just for 1 minute. I personally believe the reason that the banking system is still the gigantic share of all payments and affiliated payment systems and payments is simply that people trust them. And they do trust them because they are secure. They've proven to be secure over generations of workforce. And people know that if there's a problem, there's a way to repudiate the transaction. Now, it's very interesting what we're seeing with, and some of you I'm sure are bankers, but some of the challenges around Zelle and the lack of repudiation is great from the bank's perspective, that once the transaction's complete, but it's not great from the customer's perspective because there's no way to go solve it. So it's part of the solution. It's not all of the solution. And the last thing, which is something that I think is incredibly important and becoming even more important over time, which is the notion that no one can do this themselves. You can't do it yourself. And so in that way, a fintech is not the enemy if they can be your partner. A bank is not awful if a fintech can help leverage the power that the bank has in the marketplace. The only way fintechs, in my personal opinion, are going to sort of change the world, and collectively as people interested in the space are going to change the world, is if we can find a way to work together and help each other solve these giant problems. Otherwise, we're going to get stuck in this infinite loop that we're kind of in today of improving point solution after point solution after point solution, but never really getting under the covers and solving the entirety of a problem. So I think those are the sort of the principles I would lay out for you that I think are important for payments in the future. You could call it fintech in the future. The other thing that, I have two other words I would add to this list, which are embedded, so the notion of solutions being embedded, and another being integrated. And they're different words with different meanings, which is another level after you talk about principles. I think the next thing that comes, obviously, is embedded payments. You all have heard that 100,000 times. I'm not telling you anything you didn't know. But the fact that payments and fintech will just come along with other things that a business, a consumer is doing, and integrated meaning that it's just easier. Just like Apple Pay is integrated onto your phone, back to about frictionless and smart, it gets more integrated into the actual flow of how a business, a person actually lives. So embedded and integrated, I think, are two incredibly important words as well. So as I think about the future, I would tell you that we got to think more holistically. We need to think about the entirety of the ecosystem, not trying to solve one piece or one part of the problem. We got to think about how to solve the entirety of the problem. It means you probably can't do it all yourself, which probably means you need to have partners that can help you make that come to pass so that you can deliver what we started with, which is a philosophy and approach which is really about customer first. So with that, I am close to my time, but I would be happy to take questions or have you disagree with me?
Probably got time for one question. Anybody? Yeah.
Hi, Barry. Thank you so much. I recall that several years ago you were encouraging startup fintechs to come and be a part of the Deluxe ecosystem. I'd love to hear how that is going.
So I would still welcome that opportunity. We get shockingly few inquiries. So what I would tell you is the way to, we have a pretty terrific ecosystem. We have 4,000 FI partners. We have 4 million small businesses and hundreds of the world's leading brands. And we would love to partner with people. That's number 5, right? We would love to partner with people to accelerate the progress. We know what we're good at, which is reach and secure, some of these other things, security, but we can't possibly innovate at the speed of a young fintech. So we are wide open for business. Anybody can find me anytime. My email is really simple. It's barry@deluxe.com. It's really easy. And I'd welcome the opportunity to hear from people and see if there isn't something smart to do together. I'm sorry? So we bought a company called First American Payment Systems. So we're a top 10 merchant acquirer. What makes us unique, and the reason we bought First American, is that they have their own processing back end. So we have a full platform, end-to-end platform, so we do our own processing. What else can I answer? No one threw anything, so I guess that's a good sign. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.